You can start, I'll work on the.
Excuse me?
You can start, I'll work on the Facebook one.
Okay, I guess we're up and running. This is the third meeting of our reform panel regarding criminal justice. Just so those of you who haven't seen another one, I'm George Myers, the town supervisor. We have Robert Doss, our town police chief. Artie Pierce, one of our town police officers. Sylvia Santiago, town councilwoman. Syria Briscoe Perez, school administrator. Anthony Magnano, pastor. James Hubbard, Air Force veteran. Stuart Rosenwatch from the district attorney's office. Alana Harris, our youth representative. Neil Fernandez, a town resident. Sean Davis, also a pastor, youth pastor, and Dr. Sarah Ruback, assistant executive director of St. Christopher's, and Randy Seiper, a local resident. So this is our third meeting. We'll have one more, and then we'll have a fifth meeting where we'll be opened up to the public for comments and questions, and we'll set that date after probably right at the fourth meeting, I'm hoping. Is that what your plan is, Robert?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I have an agenda here from our chief of police, so I'll turn it over to you, chief.
Okay. Did we want to go over the body cam videos first?
That's what you had on your first thing on the agenda, right? So I guess the chief has sent out the some body cam videos to the panel to review. And for those who are listening for the first time, we recently instituted body cams for all our police officers. We have 50 of them. And we had a little trial period, and now they're up and running full time. And we're very interested in monitoring them to make sure that they're working properly, that the officers are following the procedures in place. So we have sent a few out to the panel to take a look at, and maybe some comments. I think I saw two of them today, or maybe three. There was a couple of traffic stops that I remember. There was three traffic stops I think I saw. Any of the panel members want to comment on any of the body cam videos that were sent to you sometime early before this meeting?
Sure, I'd like to comment.
Okay, Neil.
Well, in regards to stop, I think he handled it very well, very professional. And it made me think, you know, our officers are sent to all kinds of stops. They encounter all kinds of things going on. And I was curious, what kind of medical training do they get? Because I can only imagine what they come across on some of their calls.
Well, let me say this, the Narcan, I think that's the one that Labarski was involved in, there is a training for that. I've done some of that training with the school that I'm involved with. And it's a pretty simple procedure. It's just a nasal spray.
Mm-hmm.
You introduce that and it kind of brings the person out of it. But as you watch the video, you could hear that the ambulance was called for and the ambulance on its way. I will tell you this, having been out in the street and on the road myself as a trooper, that you really are just doing the best you can. I mean, you have training. They certainly have a lot more training than I do now, the officers, but you're always happy to hear the ambulance or see the ambulance showing up. You're doing the best you can. And I think these guys, with their training, they knew enough, okay, we're going to get to treat this individual, but we're also calling for an ambulance.
Yeah.
So,
No, I feel he did a good job. I was just curious, like in other cases where they're more severe injuries, you know, how far their training goes, because I would imagine they're usually first on the scene when emergencies happen, you know, officers showing up.
yeah, Robin, maybe you want to address that. And sometimes you get some of our officers. We just retired an officer who was here for 17 years, who was an Army medic.
Nice.
And he had saved, while he was here for a short period of time, at least 3 lives. One of them was a child. So sometimes it depends on who shows up, but maybe the chief can explain their training in that EMS kind of stuff, Robert?
Yes, so all the officers are CPR first aid certified. We make sure those certifications are done. We do refreshers in those because that's what they're primarily doing. They do a lot of CPR calls. They'll get there first before the ambulance corps quite oftentimes because, again, the officers are out on patrol where the ambulance corps is back here at their station and responding from there. So So that's one of the things. Everybody, all the police officers are Narcan trained, and they all carry Narcan in the police cars. So they average roughly about 10 saves with the Narcan a year, and it was up last year with the pandemic. It was actually down the year before those numbers.
Right.
So unfortunately that went up, and that's what the police department requires of our officers. So we do have other officers that are current or former members of ambulance corps. Officer Massapus belongs to Cornwall Ambulance. Sergeant Sylvester is a former member of, I believe he's an EMT from New Windsor Ambulance Corps. So depending on, what they're into or where they came from before they were police officers, they have additional training. So, and all of them, I will say, work closely with the ambulance corps on calls.
Wow.
And there's a very good relationship there. And quite often when you see a life saved, whether it be from ambulance corps members or the police department, it's usually hand in hand together.
Right.
And that's a really good thing that they have such a good working relationship together, because whether it be a car accident or somebody in an emergency at their home, somebody's fallen, something like that, it's teamwork that quite often saves the day. So I hope that answered your question.
Rob, would you give a quick explanation about Narcan for people there are some people probably not sure about what that Narcan business is about?
Sure. So Narcan is used, we're all trained for Narcan use, and it's used for opiate overdoses. So what it does basically, the technique that we use, we have little vials, and they have almost like a cone at the end, and the officers are trained to basically spray that up the person who's suspected of having an overdose's nose. It'll eventually get into their bloodstream. Sometimes it takes a couple minutes, like you saw in the video. Sometimes they have to do another dose, but it'll eventually get into their bloodstream. And remember, they're quite often in respiratory distress, so they're not breathing very much, and their pulse is slowed down. So it takes a little while to get into the bloodstream. And basically what that drug does, it counteracts the effects in the brain and gets their respiratory and their heart back working, speeds up. And a lot of times, like you didn't see it necessarily in that video, he was starting to come back around when the ambulance corps showed up. But a lot of times they'll come right to, and they'll not even know where they are or what happened. And the officers or the paramedics or whoever are there have to explain, listen, just please calm down. You just overdosed. We're trying to, make sure you're okay. We want you to go to the hospital, those kind of things. So
Right.
it's quite amazing. Like I said, there's been a lot of, saves where if the Narcan wasn't used, the people quite certainly would have died. And we're starting to see it more in the homes too. Because as you probably know, New York has a big initiative to really put that drug out to, even if it's family members that know they have somebody in their home that may overdose, they'll prescribe that out. And so it's available to keep the people alive. So.
Yeah. Wow. And if you don't mind, one quick follow-up on that. The video of Officer Martin pulling over the driver by the tracks, that interaction was very interesting, as he handled it well did the driver. But what I liked most about that video was the fact that he used, he let her off without a ticket, but the reasoning he used and that he explained himself and the reasoning, I thought that was really nice and appreciated.
And that's something we try to stress here. I think I mentioned it in the past meetings, if the result of that traffic stop can be just to educate a little bit about safety, then it's a success. There's not always a need to issue a ticket, as you know. So we really try to push that out. And as you saw, I think the woman was very receptive to, she knew she had gone through that red light. I think she said her child even told her that she did. But
yeah, it was a good interaction.
Yeah, and that's, so whether a ticket was issued or not, the message was sent that, you got to be very careful when you're driving on, especially down on River Road with trains coming through and trucks coming off across the tracks, so it could turn into a serious situation, but I think we handled it well.
It also is a good way to change perspective as far as relationships with law enforcement and community.
Yeah, but Mr. Hubbard, you have any comment about these traffic stops? I read an email from you about them that you sent in.
Oh, yes, thank you very much, George. And it's difficult for me to call you George, but I'm going to try to do that as opposed
Do
to.
that.
Thank you. Neil really captured the message here. Perception versus reality. And what I want to bring out, especially in traffic stops with my children, with my grandchildren, even with me, many minorities fear police, as we know. So that is a hurdle that is very difficult to overcome. It makes police officers' lives difficult, at least from my perspective, from my experiences. So when there is an opportunity, and that's the point that I really want to emphasize, every day that a police officer, in my opinion, is on the job, they have the opportunity to do wonderful work that is being done in the town of New Windsor. But that's not always the case across the state, across the county, across the nation, as you well know. So every time there is a result, it pushes people of color back. And to overcome that, it's a continuous battle. And it's frustrating. And I'll just recap by saying that even with excellent training, to convince many minorities that police officers have their best interest at heart, it's difficult. At least from my perspective. Others may bring another experience, but the reality is Black lives matter, all lives matter. But it's very, very difficult to convince many minorities that police officers are there as servants and that they're going to be treated equally. So to put the cap on this, as we happen to see, the officer in that video, well-intentioned, and did a great job explaining, and it takes that on a consistent basis to help people connect with our wonderful police officers in this town and across the nation.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment on anything? Stop.
I kind of want to say something, if that's right. With what James was saying, how a lot of people kind of don't trust the police. I think a lot of it, like for people my age, like teenagers, we see the media and like how the media portrays a lot of things, and we have this like idea that all people are like that, all police officers, and I think for like our town, it's not really the case. From the videos that I've seen, the police officers were really nice, and they handled like the situations really nice, and they like explained to the community how things, like what they did, like to kind of get them to understand it more, was really nice. But I think the media like oftentimes portrays like a false narrative to like teenagers, and they get this assumption that like all people are like that. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say.
Now, that's a good point, because you're always going to see things that are bad. You'll never see a routine traffic stop like the one that Martin did with the woman with the light. He goes back, gives her the things, and she says, well, where's the ticket? And he says, well, you want one? I said, no, I don't want one. So it was kind of like, that's an everyday kind of thing that I think police officers do throughout the country. But then when they do things that are really off the chart, those are the ones that catch up. And then there's a belief by people that, oh, they're all like that. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to bring out a little bit here, that we're trying to get these videos to see what happens. And, you know, we're waiting for a video that will come along where there will be some kind of little violent reaction from people. So these are just the ones that we have so far, but we're hoping to see other ones. Sylvia, you have any comment on any of these things? She muted?
Yes.
No,
Sylvia, can you unmute?
Yes, sorry, thank you. On the first video, on the Officer Zabarski one, so my question is, why is it, and if, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the gentleman who needed help was known to everyone. So my question is, and maybe Chief Doss responded earlier, why is a police officer going, why is he the first one to go? Is it because he's the first one that can get there, as you described before? If this is something, it seems medical, so why is, a police officer having to deal with this medical situation?
Well, it's unusual. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, by the way, this is going on. And I think I had a conversation with the chief today. We think that this guy was dumped out of a car. He was probably with somebody and he was, whatever happened, they pushed him.
That's what it sounded like.
Yeah. But I think what happens is that they call the police station and there's somebody in distress laying in a snowbank. Well, you don't know what the distress is. Could it be a homicide? Could it be somebody fighting with somebody? So the police get called. And I had a conversation with the chief today. We were talking about just this thing. How come the police are coming to him? The only people who are around 24 hours a day, 7 days a week are the police. At 3 o'clock in the morning, there is nobody to call about a water main broke, or a Central Hudson problem, or somebody's kind of having some kind of issue. And the police get involved in many things that you kind of wonder, well, should they be involved? If you have a routine traffic accident, you two exchange information, you notify your insurance company, and off you go. But people call the police, they want the police, they're not moving, and then, the police will take a report. Do they have to? No. But that's kind of just the way it is. They're the ones that are called. Now, if we didn't call the police and we call the ambulance, sometimes the ambulance doesn't want to be the first one there. They do not know what they're going to encounter when they get there. They could encounter the person that they would have some physical confrontation with. So it's a little better for them to have the police officer usually gets there first. Of all the emergency services, if there's a fire, usually the cop is the first one on the scene. So that's a conversation that I've been watching around the country. Do we really need the police to go to things? Sometimes they're the only ones around. And I don't know how to address that. Would you have some mental health people standing by someplace just in case someone calls? I mean, at 3 o'clock in the morning, there's a mental health issue. It's usually the police officer who's out there that's got to deal with it. So I don't know. That's why we're having these kind of conversations, to see what people think or what should be happening. That's kind of the way.
Sure, no, exactly. That's what I've been thinking too. Off the top of my head, some kind of experienced emergency, personnel, but that's just, we'll come back to that. The other question, the other thought that I had was in the discussion that we just had with Mr. Hubbard, talking about, and with Ms. Harris, about possible, biased incidences, during traffic stops or so forth, and talking about perceptions. And sometimes some people, and I'd like to know about the bias training of, maybe how that will touch on this. But sometimes, some people get stopped a number of times a week. And you know what, while a police officer might, I don't know what a police officer would do, but you know what, sometimes people are just at the ready because they're just so frustrated from being stopped twice a week, 3 times a week, and so forth. So not every exchange is going to be an easygoing one, although, I hope it would be. So how do you deal with those difficult ones when someone is not being as responsive? How do you diffuse that situation? So I don't know if that's in the discussion for further down the road.
Yeah, listen, I'll let the chief speak to that, but Mr. Hubbard's email he sent in, he talked about the person being stopped with the stress and fear, because they see this stuff on TV, they're a little concerned on what's going to happen. Yeah, on the other end of that, probably a traffic stop may be the most dangerous thing a police officer does. People think it's a bank robbery or some kind of shootout, but it's a traffic stop. You see someone maybe roll through a red light, and you put the red lights on to pull them over, and it's just a routine thing. And it turns out he just stuck up a jewelry store, and you walk up and he shoots you. So it's stressful, I think, on a lot of different issues. But police officers who've been around for a while kind of get comfortable with those kind of things. So yeah, I kind of get that people, me, having been retired, having been around police a long time, I get a little anxious if I see the police car putting his lights on and pulling me over. I think everybody gets a little anxious, like, oh my goodness. And I just talked to the town engineer today, talked about something else, and I thought, let me drop this on him. And he said, yeah, you know, when I see the lights behind me, I just get a little like, oh my God, what did I do? You know, so I don't, you know, I think it's magnified, obviously, from what I'm hearing from people of color. Yeah, it's probably even more, but I think it's almost a natural reaction to people like, oh my God, the police are pulling me over. I don't
George,
know.
can I ask a question? Just,
Yes.
addressed to the initial question. The fact, the premise is that some people are stopped 2 to 3 times a week.
Right.
Is that supported by any, I mean, are we talking about just something anecdotal, or is there data in New Windsor?
I'll just jump in right here. Once my husband was stopped twice in 1 week in 2 different locations and so forth. So that's why I bring it up.
Okay.
And whether there was valid reason or not is a different story. But
No, I
it
get
can be frustrating. So I brought up an actual.
No,
Sure.
I get that. I just wanted to know if that was anecdotal, one occasion that you're familiar with, or is that something,
I've been
more
told by
pervasive that you're
residents.
discussing?
Sure, I've been told by residents, they get a ticket for something on their car, they get it fixed or whatever, and then the same day they're getting another ticket for almost the same item or something different. So I have heard these items before.
I'm hearing two things here, but let me address one, that you can't just stop somebody. In my day, we would just stop you when it's a routine check. You can't do that anymore. You have to have a reason to pull someone over. Just can't pull them over because you don't kind of like the looks of the car. There has to be a reason for you to stop that car. So if someone has even a minor, like a license plate light out, that's the reason to stop the car. Obviously, moving violations are stopped. So you have to have a reason to stop the car. So if the person has a taillight out on Tuesday and doesn't get it fixed again until Thursday, and someone else stops them on Wednesday, that could happen.
I understand, and I fully understand. My point is just that not everyone's going to always be as receptive to the easy lesson. And my question, what we discussed, what I asked before, is I'd like to learn more about the bias training and how that would respond, how that would handle something like that to someone that's not, that maybe feels frustrated because they've been stopped a couple of times or for whatever other reason.
Yeah, no, I could see that, but I mean, listen, bias training, I think, the chief, you jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, is when you first, if there's an interaction. There's no interaction yet, you're just stopping somebody. And many times you don't know who's in that car. Could be a female, could be a male, I mean, could be anybody. But then when you kind of walk up, now you see who you're dealing with. And then, I don't know, the chief, didn't you touch on bias training last week, or did I miss that?
Yes, I'm gonna actually talk about that in a little while with the.
Okay, all right, so let's address that. We'll probably get back to Sylvia's comment when you do that. All right, anything else on these body cams that we sent out? All right, let's move along. All right, Chief, I think you wanted to talk something about the community survey?
Yes, so back in August of 2020, so towards the end of last year, the police department, through the town website, town Facebook, put out a community satisfaction survey. We had it out for, from what I could remember here, about 2 to 3 weeks. I emailed the results out to the panel. The results are also on the website for anybody else to see under the Reimagining Public Safety Collaborative Panel information. There's a bunch of documents down at the bottom if you scroll down. So it's there for anybody to see. We did that before we realized we even needed to do these reform meetings. So that was something we were going to do either way. But as part of this, the governor thought it would be a good idea if some police departments did this. I know not all the police departments that are going through with these meetings did any type of survey like that, but we did. We emailed out that to you guys, so you should have been able to look at that. It was an online survey that we did, and it wasn't necessarily a scientific survey or anything, but it was to gather general feedback about the police. We put it out similar to how we put out the comprehensive plan. So we put a link out, asked people to do the survey, be honest. It was an anonymous survey, so we hope people were honest with it. It was easy to design. We used some other, surveys that we found from other police departments, and we kind of tailored it to ourselves. It's simple to deploy because it was online, and we hope, people were unbiased when they took it. So we also put some text alerts out to town, whoever was signed up for our text alerts in town. So we tried to push it out as much as we could through the means that we had at present. So I think we were pretty successful in doing that. I know there's different opinions on that. We also send out a couple reminders, and once we were able to go into that, the IT department was able to go into that survey. But once we did the reminders, if we were down to just a few more surveys getting done, we realized we were, everybody that was receiving our notifications about it had done the survey, and it was time to take it down. And that was about 2 or 3 weeks later. And again, just keep in mind too, this went out, so this link went out on Facebook. So in theory, that could have been seen by anywhere, at any time. So there's no guarantee it was only town residents that saw that. It could get, shared and reposted and stuff. So just keep that in mind. We're just being transparent with that. We got about 600 survey results. I did a little talking with some of the other chiefs and things around. So our results were about 600 people. So keep that in mind. Orange County is going through the similar process that we're doing with our panel. They did a survey similar to ours online. As of last Thursday, which was when we were supposed to go over this, but we ran out of time on our last meeting, they had about 165 responses, and that would be countywide. So our 600 number starts to look a little better. I also talked to the Mount Hope chief, and he didn't mind if I shared this information with you all. So we're trying to figure out different ways. Maybe next time when we do this, how could we get this out to more people and get more responses? Because ideally, we would like everybody in the town to be able to do the survey. So what they did, they had a pretty unique idea. They actually they mailed through the Postal Service 2,200 postcards out. And the postcards had QR codes with and they also had a website address and they mailed them to every location in their town. Out of those 2,200 postcards that they mailed out, which cost them about $1,000 to do, they netted 94 responses. So in the future, we're going to have to be creative with how we're going to get the survey out if we're going to do it again to get more than 600 responses. Because as far as I know, from what I've heard through my peers, 600 seems to be the highest amount. So, so take it for what it's worth. I hope you all were able to review the data that was collected. I will say the full survey results, and that includes the last 3 questions that everybody was asked, which had some free text fields. The full survey result is 1,200 pages, so it takes a little bit going through. When we put it out, a lot of people put their names, addresses, phone numbers, and things in there. They didn't consent to any type of disclosure, so I have no problem giving everybody the survey. We would just have to go through it and redact those names and addresses, but you would certainly be available to see the comments and stuff like that. There's no problem with that. And I would say the comments correspond with the results that you see. There was certainly positive. There was some negative in there as well. So I turn it over to the chair if there's any comments.
I just have a question. I'm sorry. I wanted to ask Chief, would it be possible to get a summary of the types of comments that the community shared in the survey? It would be great to hear, what the community feels is working, what the police department is doing well, and what are some of the issues that they brought up regarding, the police department. It may help us in framing reform as we move forward.
I could certainly do that. I'll have somebody on that as early as tomorrow. I'll share, most of the comments, a lot of the comments were just, requesting an officer to patrol the development maybe a little more or things of that nature. But I will certainly get that out as soon as I get that information redacted, the personal information, and we'll get it out to you.
Chief Doss, if I could just make a comment, if that's all right. Question 10 on the survey says that kind of reveals that the majority of the people surveyed had no contact or had not contacted the police in the last 6 months. And so, you know, the results of a survey like that may not be an accurate indicator of what interactions with the police department are actually like, and the impression of the community. I think it might actually help if the department used whatever databases you guys have available to contact perhaps those that have interactions with the police department in the last 6 to 12 months, and maybe target some of those folks for this kind of survey in the future, so that, you know, some of the other questions, there's like a, you know, are you satisfied with the community involvement of the police department? A large percentage of that answer was, I don't know, because they have not had no interaction. So it might even be good to have a targeted survey towards a specific, you know, a goal, you know, who has interacted with the police department that could give us more feedback and speak to some of these questions more accurately. So that was just sort of a point of suggestion for the future.
One of the other things we've done in years past, we've had a survey similar to this available here at the police station for our records window. So quite oftentimes people will come, and again, with the pandemic, a lot of this is being done through email, but there's probably no reason why the survey couldn't be emailed out. So when people come in and request their accident report or whatever type of report or information that they may need from the police department, to just automatically attach that survey to that FOIL request, which is probably not a bad idea and something kind of on the same page as what you're saying.
Yeah, that question threw me off also, Sean. That's why I was asking, you know, maybe some of the comments that were sent in by the community will give us a little bit more information, because overall, the responses were positive in nature, or like you said, you know, very few people have had interactions with the police. So it's kind of hard to gauge, you know, what is the community really thinking?
Yeah, you're right about that. Most people have no interaction with the police. Most people have never been in handcuffs. So I think maybe we could take a look at some of the people that we have had interaction with and see what their comments are. Maybe next time we do a survey, that's probably not a bad idea. Knowing that some of the people that you interact with, the police have what they refer to as frequent flyers. What that means is they deal with the same person over and over and over again. And then when I kind of review the blotter, I talk to the chief. I like, how many times am I going to see this in a blotter? So yeah, it might be something that we probably could look at, Robert. Maybe next time we do a survey, to direct it to some people that we had some interaction with. Knowing that if you arrest somebody for DWI, well, they're not going to be thrilled with you. But let's see what exactly they have to say. So I think that might be something we should look at.
Can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's general, but if the officers had a way of having a barcode on them, where after their interactions with the people they stop or deal with, they could just say, hey, can you scan the barcode, and that'll link you to the site so you could do a survey. Might be one way of, you know, getting answers. And in the survey, of course, if they're disgruntled because they were drinking or they did something they shouldn't be doing, you know, understood. But it's a good way of getting direct information.
Yeah, I think like I mentioned before, and I think the chief would probably agree with it, that maybe we could look at that. You just need to be a little careful. Some municipality in this area went into some kind of deal where when they stopped somebody, they had to give them their card. And then when they gave them their business card, they were supposed to ask them some questions. People didn't want to tell them their name. It just kind of got a little crazy. And I don't know where they are with it. I don't even know if they're doing it anymore. But I think the intention was good. So you have to be very careful when we get into this, because as you can see from some of the body cams, if someone really doesn't want to tell you their name, okay. So I think maybe that's something else, Chief, to kind of just make a note on, and we'll see when we do surveys and we take a look at that kind of thing, see if it's something we could plug in.
Yes, certainly. And the recommendation from the governor's office too, as well, was to do it yearly, so annually. So
Okay.
Moving forward, we'll definitely adjust things, and because we want this data, we want it to be accurate. So I think those were all good suggestions.
All right, you want to talk a little bit about dispatch and 911 center that we have?
George, can I jump in for a minute?
Yeah,
You know, I understand we want a survey, and I get that we want surveys to be as accurate as they can be. But if we transition the other way and only get people who have had, how do you change the interaction? Was it good interaction? Was it bad interaction? What accuracy are you going to get on your surveys if you're only targeting people in one direction? Sure, you want from everybody, but you got to be careful about the data you're receiving if you're only targeting interaction or a car stop or somebody who's been arrested, those kinds of things. So I urge you to be careful.
yeah, no, I kind of see those pitfalls myself, but I think it has some merit, that idea. You know what I mean? To see people that we have actually had some interaction and maybe wasn't pleasant for them, to see what they have to say.
I don't disagree. I just think we need to be careful about how much credence or credit we give to that information we receive.
Yeah.
Based on how that situation occurred.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, just the statistical significance of any survey that is strictly anecdotal or limited as in scope, it's difficult to do. And we're all familiar with the surveys and their reliability on all kinds of levels. So, I mean, surveys are a great piece to get information, but just doing one and throwing it out there without any statistical controls can lead to, misunderstandings about the results.
Certainly.
Well, I'm hoping that as we explore the ideas of the survey, that we're not getting negative feedback, that we're also capturing, what the community is saying about the police and their work. I can tell you, as a building principal in the town of New Windsor, I have had the police department come and join us for various activities that are being held at the school. And the feedback that I get from the families when they attend and they see the police officers just interacting with their children or interacting with them while we're holding an event speaks volumes of the relationship that we have with the police department here in New Windsor. So those may be some opportunities to just gather feedback from the community. Just to give us an idea, what it is that they're thinking, what are some things that we could possibly be doing better. It could be something short, it doesn't have to be very extensive, just to be able to get some feedback. I get really good feedback from families when they see the police joining us at our events. So I'm really glad that we have that kind of relationship with the police department here in this town.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I think once you see somebody as a person, it's a little easier to kind of say it's kind of a regular person here. It's not maybe a police officer, but just like I am. Everybody else is pretty much the same. All right, Robert, you want to get into this dispatch center?
Yeah, so one of the things the governor wants us to go over is our call centers, 911, and here in New Windsor, we have our own dispatch center here at the police headquarters. So our dispatch center here it's open 24/7. We've been in this building since 91. It hasn't closed since. It's been open and staffed. At all times, there's 2 civilian dispatchers in the room. They're long-term town employees, typically. They're familiar with the town, they're familiar with the roads, they're familiar with the police officers, they're familiar with the locations in town and what's been happening. So that certainly helps increase officer safety, and just their knowledge in general is a big asset for the town as a whole. So our dispatchers dispatch for police, they dispatch for fire, so Vales Gate Fire, New Windsor Fire, and at times the other fire jurisdictions that cover the town, which something like Salisbury Mills. And they'll be the first person to meet the people with any type of walk-in type-ish complaints. So there's a window that the public can walk up to request a police officer or whatever they're looking to do. They handle emergency calls and non-emergencies. Keep in mind, not all the calls that come in require emergency dispatch. right? We can get a call for a barking dog or a report of some kind, or some civil questions about an eviction or something like that, or something about a court or court date. The dispatchers are trained to handle all those kind of things. It could be an adult protective service call, or someone just calling to wonder what's going on with the roadway conditions. So they handle all those type of things as well. So as you can imagine, it gets quite busy in there. One of the primary things they do is answer the phone, and they direct the emergency services around. So they play a vital role with the police department. We're lucky to have our own dispatch center here. Makes things easier. We do have vehicle locators in all of our marked police cars. So the dispatchers have a map that's up on a TV screen on the wall. They can see where all the police cars are at any time. So when a call comes in, it's very easy for them to dispatch the closest car, which again, back to Sylvia Santiago's point that when you're dispatching the closest car, they're going to get there quicker, which when it comes to lives, whether it be a man down on the ground at the gas station like we saw with Mr. Claiborne overdosing, it's certainly second save lives. So those vehicle locators came into play maybe about 2-3 years ago, and they've been a huge asset for us. And that was done countywide. Very busy times, as you could imagine, whether it be a serious motor vehicle accident. Those two dispatchers in that room are responsible for not only coordinating all the police officers that are going to be responding over, but the ambulances. And it's not always just one ambulance. It could be multiple ambulances from multiple jurisdictions and fly cars, and as well as fire apparatus if there's entrapment or fire risk. So you could imagine, and then they're also keeping up with the calls that are still coming in. So it's a very hectic room, and they get to be very good at what they do. The dispatchers are also trained to assist citizens however they need, and that's providing numbers, phone numbers, and referring people however they feel is appropriate. Obviously, there still is Orange County 911 in this town. They use a little different method with their dispatch. They have a call taker who then relays the information through the computer over to a dispatcher, who then dispatches on the appropriate units. They typically do not dispatch the New Windsor police unless it's an emergency. They're located out in Goshen, New York. Those dispatchers, just as an advantage of ours, they may or may not be familiar with locations and people in New Windsor. So that's certainly something that is important to us.
I just make a comment about our dispatch. It's an expensive proposition for us to do that, and it's on the taxpayer's back that pays for it. But we think it's important because if not, then the calls would go to the county. They're not familiar with the area as much as our dispatchers are. So it's an expensive proposition, but I think it's very, very worthwhile for the residents. You get a much quicker response from the emergency service people. I didn't mean to butt in there, Robert. Go ahead.
That's okay. So one other little thing too. So 911 calls. So if you call 911 from your house, you have a house phone, or you're calling it from a business that you work at in town, calling 911, the call doesn't come here. And that's one of the things we've kind of pushed to try to change, but it hasn't happened. But in all transparency here, I want you guys to realize, so Valesgate School, for instance, if they call 911 on the phone call goes out to Goshen, and they have to tell the person in Goshen what's going on. And whether, depending on the seriousness of that, they may get on the radio and dispatch us, or they may just relay that call into our dispatch headquarters, at which time it probably needs to be explained again on what's going on, and then we respond. So we always push to have that 911 call that came from a landline in town should come here, but that's not the case, because that certainly a significant delay there with that. I'll open the floor up with any questions as far as our dispatch center goes. But what we're looking for here is it meeting the needs of the community? Number one, any type of bias or anything we need to be concerned about. And I also forwarded out the dispatch policy and procedure here for New Windsor. And any new training to shift response functions to social services. I think the town supervisor already kind of spoke on that. So.
Okay. I'm not hearing any comments. So how about this training in education, and continuing education, I think was brought up before?
I have one question about the
Oh.
dispatch. That's okay. I apologize.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Let other folks have a chance to talk. I'm talking a lot. So if I don't know if you can clarify, Chief Doss, what is the issue with getting the 911 call routed to the dispatch in New Windsor? What is the hang up with that? What's the difficulty?
So the difficulty is the way the system was set up when Orange County set up their 911 system. It wasn't set up that way. Going back probably 3 or 4 years, we actually approached the county about that. We did a little research. All the surrounding counties to Orange County are set up the way that when a local business or a local home calls 911, it rings at the local police department, provided they have a dispatch center or someone to answer the phone, obviously. We have that capability here, but yet the calls in Orange County are going out to Goshen, even if they're dialed right next door at Temple Hill School. If they call, it's going out to Goshen. It's not ringing right next door for the prompt or response. So it was the way it was set up. Like I said, we approached the county with that. We didn't get very far. I don't know if it's a cost concern or where that tax money is going on everybody's tax bill. I'm not sure. But we ideally would like it set up to where it rings here.
If there's a way that we can support the police department in that way, I'd like to know, because I would be willing to help and assist in some way, even if it's just rallying folks, a petition or whatever we need to do, because I think that does make a big difference. I had no idea. You know, everybody would call.
Most people
everybody I
don't.
know would call 911. You know,
Most people don't.
Yeah.
And that's
So
one of
thank
the
you for
things,
letting
like when we go and talk to the schools, we'll tell the teachers in that school our 7-digit line, 565-7000. In an emergency, call that number. Because again, that number is for ambulance. You need to know one number for everything here. And it's going to ring right down the street. So that's what we tell them. And I think, you know, if you're driving through a town, you don't know where you are, you don't know the local PD's number, 911 is great. And it's, you know, if you don't know the number, that's great. But we have our own dispatch system and we can do things very quick here. So we've always pushed calling us directly.
And of course, you know, you can always, if you need to contact me after some other time, so we don't take time in the meeting or whatever. But I'm willing to support the police department in that way, in that endeavor, if there's any way I can.
Okay, thank you.
Robert, do we know how many calls come in 911 versus 565-7000? We probably could get that, right?
We can get that for sure.
Yeah, I'd be kind of interested to see what that is.
Okay.
So the emergency calls, how many come in on our 7-digit line and how many come in from 911?
That information is collected at the time of the call in our system, so it should be pretty easy to pull that up.
Okay, yeah, I'd be interested in that. Okay, so I guess training and continuous education?
Yes, okay, so moving on to training and education. The police department places a high value on education. For this panel, we did some research into our police officers' educations. What we determined was 36 of the 49 officers that we have here have some type of college degrees at about 74%. So 74 of them have college degrees, 74%. We have 6 associate's degrees, 28 bachelor's degrees, and 2 master's degrees. The police budget for training and education for 2021 is $22,500. That goes towards police training of any type that we have to send anybody to, or we choose to send anybody to, as well as some college education that's through the collective bargaining agreement. Much of the police training that we do is for free, which is really good. Either that training is put on through New York State DCJS or the Orange County Police Chiefs Association, who recently moved their police academy out to Middletown. The training there is free. If we send someone to the basic school, say a new police officer, there's a cost for that. But primarily, most of the training that they're doing out there is free. And that's a big asset for all the police departments in Orange County. The Chiefs Association is very proud of that. We currently have 25 officers that are certified as field training officers. Those are the officers that train the new police officers when they come on board. That's a 32-hour certification program. I'll move on to in-service training. So we talked about, in our first meeting, we talked about accreditation and the state standards. One of those standards is that every officer receive at least 21 hours of in-service continuing education training annually. So 21 hours annually, the state's saying what we need. And that must include, they don't say how many hours per se, but what must be included in that 21 hours is firearms training, legal updates, policy review, and a review of use of force and deadly physical force. So in keeping what we've been doing with the panel, we looked at 2019 and 2020. All the hours of training that our police officers have done, and this doesn't include college, just training as being a police officer here. The average officer here over the course of the last 2 years, this is for 1 year, each officer averaged 103 hours of training per year. The state's asking 21, we're giving them 103 on average, and that's with a year of COVID where there wasn't a lot of in-person training and everything, a lot of things had to be adjusted. So that number would certainly have been higher.
Chief, is there a statewide or county-wide average? If I'm correct, you're saying 103 hours per year each officer has in training.
So the average here in New Windsor PD is 103 hours average per officer for 2019 and 2020 when you average them all together. I would have no idea what the county average is.
And the reason why I'm surprised, I'm happily surprised, that I'm just wondering, is that something that's generally known by the community?
No, I'm sure that's not commonly known by the community, but I will say it's something that education and training in police work is really the gold standard for professionalism. You're not going to have a professional police department without training and education. And that's
Correct.
the bottom line on that. So we take it very seriously. And again, between myself and I have a lieutenant, Dan Valeri, in charge of training. That's one of his primary missions with accreditation. And we're constantly getting information coming in of training going on. And if we can send somebody where it's not going to cost us a lot of money, we're going to send them. And that's an asset to the town. I'll go into a little more of the types of training. I'm not going to talk I could talk for 2 hours just on this, but I'm going to try to get through this. Some of the additional training that our officers get, they get less lethal tools and devices. So like taser training, they get that annually. They get de-escalation training. And I know, Mr. Hubbard, you've asked about the de-escalation training. What I'll tell you is they get a lot of de-escalation training because not only is it in the block of de-escalation training that they get, it's encompassed in a lot of other trainings as well. So when they do the CIT training, a big portion of that is de-escalation training, as well as our firearms training. A lot of that is just not going out and shooting at a target. There's a lot of, it's changed over the years and it's become a lot more de-escalation type training, shoot, no shoot situations. We want the officers using their brains rather than just going out and using the trigger finger. They have to have that brain engaged at all times. So that's the stuff that the range officers go over with them. We're doing reality-based training. We were able to purchase a lot of, it's very expensive to get into that type of training with the equipment. And we were able, because you need a lot of safety equipment to keep the officers safe while they're doing their training. And there's simulated weapons that they use and those kind of things. So we're doing that type of training. We're doing force-on-force training, ethical training on ethics, bias training, bloodborne pathogen training, sexual harassment training, CPR and AED training, Narcan training, defensive driving, accident prevention training, and domestic violence training. A lot of that's the training that we do annually in all those hours that I'm telling you. Every single one of our officers from the top down, from me down to our newest officer, has all received 40 hours of crisis intervention training. I anticipate talking about that in a separate block, hopefully at our next meeting, because that's deserving of its own little block of talking about for everybody here, because I think it's one of the things I'm proud of. here for the police department. So as far as then, and then on top of that type of training, we also have what we call a specialized training. That training includes, say, training for our accident reconstruction unit. So we have a group of men and women that'll be able to investigate those serious collisions that occasionally occur in the town. That's training above that of a regular police officer. We also have 2 drug recognition experts. They're the officers that get called for when they come across a driver that's suspected of possibly having either prescription or illicit drugs in their system while they're operating their vehicle. They're able to do special tests and things to be able to determine the category of drug that's possibly in the driver's system. We have canine narcotics training for the canine handlers. We have officers trained in hate crime investigations, crimes against children, sexual offense trauma, informed victim response, child forensic interviewing. And on top of that as well, we have a lot of supervisors here, sergeants, lieutenants, deputy chief, chief. They are required to go to supervisory type training. So when you get promoted to sergeant in New York State, you go to a 3-week course in police supervision. And really, according to the state and DCJS, you're done. Like, you could make it all the way up to the position of chief of police after that with that 3-week course. The state doesn't require any more training as far as that goes. So, but we continue that. We don't believe that. So we kind of continue with other things to develop our leaders here and our supervisors, because they need to be on top of their game at all times, and they need to acquire new skills and learn new procedures and processes that are out there. Some of the places that some of our leaders here have gone, the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia, the Mid-Atlantic Law Enforcement Executive Seminar, that was at Princeton University. They've gone to Incident Command School. That's how to run a big incident if it were to happen, levels 300 and 400. Active shooter supervisory tabletop exercises with the school districts we've done. And a few other courses here as well. I'll let you know too that we also have 13 instructors here in the police department. Those instructors are not only to the standard of the state to be able to teach our own officers things, but they're also to the standard where they can go out to the police academy and teach at the police academy. So there's certain levels of different types of instructors. A lot of the instructor certifications gets into defensive tactics, firearms, and those kind of things. You need special certifications to make sure everybody is safe and you're doing things properly. So a lot of those instructor certs go with those. I'm going to take a couple minutes to talk about some special training, but I just want to ask if there's any questions at this point.
I have a couple of questions,
Sure.
Chief. So on some of them that you mentioned before, is the de-escalation one of the ones that are required annually?
Yeah, so we do, it's not required on behalf of state accreditation, but it's
Okay.
required on part of what we do. So, and that's what I'm explaining, is that all this extra training we're doing, de-escalation gets incorporated into most everything that we can. Obviously, we can't put it into something like CPR and AED, but we can put it into our firearms programs or any type of, even a domestic call. I mean, it could be, and something that shouldn't be overlooked. So we're constantly teaching it and instructing it. But the guys are constantly, and girls that we have on the force, they're constantly using this stuff out on the street. So, and they're constantly practicing and using those techniques. So when an even seriouser incident happens, they're really on top of their game with it. So I'll give you a simple scenario. So an officer pulls up on a car accident that's occurring, and the 2 drivers are out of their car and they're arguing about whose fault it was, or why did you pull out in front of me? That's a simple situation that the officer can get out of their car and approach that situation and use de-escalation skills to de-escalate that situation and get it under control and make sure everybody's safe and do what they need to be doing. So it doesn't always have to be that armed, barricaded subject in a house or somebody going through mental health crisis. They're using these techniques, I'm telling you, almost everything they do.
Sure.
It really comes to fruition when they're out on the street, because things are crazy out there. I mean, I don't think I have to tell anybody on the panel that. And I think in some of the videos, and my hope with these body cam videos is in the future, maybe when the panel Once we achieve our goal of developing a plan and getting that passed with resolution, to continue to meet, whether it be on a monthly basis, and talk about these body cam videos with everybody on the panel and really dissect it. And that's where you're really going to see and understand the de-escalation that the officers are so accustomed to doing. It's really part of the culture here is to use their words and to use their minds and try to de-escalate every situation that they can get in, so it's successful conclusion. Because we don't want to have to use a lot of the things that we have on our belt. Let's say we have other calls to go on. So if we're tied up doing other things, we really just want to get through those things. So any other questions?
I actually have two more questions, if you don't mind. I'm sorry. And I have just one quick comment. So the de-escalation is something that you just touched on before, and some of the comments that were made earlier regarding concerns at traffic stops, or, everyone said that they kind of get a little on edge when there is a police officer behind them or their lights go on and so forth. So I could see those de-escalation skills are probably needed at each interaction with someone almost, right? Regarding the training, do you on a regular basis, or how often is there recommended training to the officers on a regular basis?
For what type of training?
For any training that you're saying right now, you're saying that we go above and beyond. So my question to you, you talked about a lot of interesting trainings that sound great if everyone took them. Do you make recommendations to some of the officers that don't? So I'm going to guess not every officer has taken 103 hours, even though it's an average. Do you do recommendations, and are they usually accepted?
Sure. So I'll answer that in two parts. So there are certain things like firearms. So the guys and girls here, the officers will go out to the range twice a year to do firearm training. Again, that's just not shooting at a target. That's doing multiple things. As far as, let's say, a taser, they're recertifying in a taser once a year as a less lethal type of device. So those things are done every year. Every single officer is doing it. Even the command staff here, we're doing that. So everybody does that. Then there's other things that are in addition. So let's say I'll go back to some of the courses that I talked about. So child forensic interviewing, let's say. So I think this is what you're kind of asking. Maybe 1 or 2 or 3 officers wanted to go to that school. We'll take a look at it, and if it seems to fit with what they're doing, like obviously like some detectives would want to go to that type of a school. That's what they do. That's who went to that school. We also had one of our female officers who we thought would do an excellent job with it. We allowed her to go as well. So we really look at, we want round pegs and round holes, right? So we want to see who we think is going to do a good job with something. And it's a selection process, but we try to be fair about it too, right? We can't just send the same people all the time to schools. So we're fair about it. And ultimately, once the police officers get a couple years on the job, they seem to find a route that they're going to take, whether it be a supervision route, or they want to be on the traffic unit, or they want to be a detective, and their career starts to take that path. And we try to build them up to be able to do that.
And then just the last question is, and I don't know what the right terminology would be, but I talked about frustration before about somebody being stopped. Now, the opposite, I'm sure that police officers also get, very frustrated. I have a brother-in-law that used to be a federal police officer, and he used to get very frustrated. So what kind of wellness, some kind of self-wellness training, is there something available like that for the officers?
Sure. Could I ask you to stay tuned, because that's one of the segments on the agenda.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you for answering my questions.
So,
listen, before we move on, Robert talked about the training with so our officers are professional officers, and everybody who knows me knows I'm very much about the dollars, the taxpayer dollars, and that's why I'm so beloved by some of our town employees. But the liability factor enters in here, and Dave Zagon's with us tonight from our town attorney. And when something does happen, these kind of training, the training that the chief is having his people go through, certainly helps us if something goes awry. That, listen, yes, we did this training, we did this training, and it helps for any blowback onto the taxpayer. So it's kind of a twofold thing, and we're always talking about making sure these guys are prepared and they're being professional. But there's also a liability thing, and sometimes you'll read where they'll take some town or city to task because they didn't do some type of training. and the officer failed. So that's another reason that I'm very, very supportive of training, even though sometimes it costs lots of money. I think it's important that we have it for those couple of reasons. I just want to interject that there's other reasons that we do this training that probably people wouldn't think about, but I know that Dave Zagon, our attorney, and myself, we think about those kind of things. Okay, Robert, you want to do, Sylvia brought up that supporting officer wellness. That's your next topic?
That's the next topic. I just want to highlight 4 in particular courses that we've done over the last few years, because it definitely touches upon why the panel was formed and things. So I just want to point out here, you're going to notice that we've done something every year since 2017 on building their trust in community engagement. So I want to point that out because I think that's very important, and it's really been ever since I made lieutenant and got up to the point where I could actually start making some decisions for the department. We started moving in that direction. Okay, and I think this is very important to highlight, especially for the panel. So in December of 2017, our entire department had been through the procedural justice training. You might have read about that if you read through the guidebook put out by the governor's office for this panel. It was something he highlighted and thinks is very important. Well, we did that training back in 2017. We were one of the first police departments in the state to get that training. We got the training from the Department of Justice and their community relations services. So we were certainly ahead of the curve on that training. And I think that's the trend that I want to put across to the panel is we're not doing this type of training because we're being forced to now. We've been doing this training and we're ahead of the curve. And we continue to want to do this training in the future. So procedural justice training. So those, if you don't know, it's an evidence-based solution. It's a training that's been recognized as a progressive way for police agencies to further enhance their character, honor, and integrity within the local community. It focuses on the way that police interact with the public and how these interactions influence crime rates and the public's view of the police and their willingness to obey the law. According to the United States Department of Justice, evidence shows that practicing procedural justice can have a significant impact on compliance, cooperation, public safety, and officer safety. So we did that training in 2017. In 2018, so I had developed some good contacts at the Department of Justice and their community relations crew at the time. With those contacts, I asked for some more training for 2018. So they brought us another program, and this is the one I liked the most. I believe Ms. Briscoe Perez was actually involved in this as well, because we had several people from the community involved in this. It was called Strengthening Police and Community Partnerships, Making Communities Safer. And again, ahead of the curve, we were one of the pilot locations in the country for this training. We were one of the first 3 agencies in the entire country that did this training. And again, it was put on by the Department of Justice, Programs and Office of Community Relations Services. Members of the community and members of the police force worked through scenario-based exercises together in the same room and opened key dialogues on the following themes: the importance and role of community engagement in public safety, the core principles for successful engagement, the importance of process and how we experience process in the real world, how mistrust works and its impact, how experiences shape expectations, and how the community bank account and its value to increasing community, making the community safer. So I really enjoyed putting this training on, and we had facilitators from the Department of Justice that oversaw the interactions between the police and the community. And they really put you through some scenarios where you had to really interact and really kind of put yourself in each other's shoes and how you think and how it's perceived. And it's something that I actually tried to put it on again, and I contacted the people that ran it, and they are actually on to different programs because around that time, things had changed in the Department of Justice. But I do have all the materials, so in the future we could put this on again. But that was my my favorite training out of all of them. And then the following year, we put on another course in July of 2019 on the same avenue as these other ones through the Department of Justice. It was called T3, and it was something that I had never heard about. It was something pretty new that was out there. It's called TACT, Tactics, and Trust. It's another evidence-based training based on knowledge, tools, and skills to help better diffuse and resolve tensions between the least amount of force necessary. Students will have an enhanced capability to safely and effectively handle unpredictable and potentially dangerous interactions on the street. That training was put on for some of our police officers here as well as our leadership here. So another one, community related and on the same level. And I think most of you know last year, August of 20, so 4 years in a row, and then in 2020, we did the fair and impartial policing where we brought in an outside private company to come in and teach our police officers, because I didn't think it would hold as much value if our own officers taught us, or if a neighboring jurisdiction's police officers came in and taught us. I thought it would be much more well received and more worthy of what needed to be taught here to bring an outside vendor in to teach this. And so we contracted with the largest vendor in the country that comes out and teaches this topic. They've caught agencies as big as New York City with the topic of fair and impartial policing. And we were very proud to do that. That training aims to educate officers with how implicit biases can have negative consequences on the officer's perceptions and behavior as they do their job. This specific training curriculum was unique because it was science-based approach to train officers in the use of new skills that they can use to reduce and manage any biases that they may have. These same skills have been shown to promote working in a more safe and just and effective manner.
Excuse me, Robert, how many officers involved in that training?
In that training, so that's a great question, Mr. Hubbard, because I want to point out that training in particular, we had all 50 police officers from this police department there. So the message that was sent there was the police chief went, the newest officer went, the detective went, everybody went. When you're sitting in a classroom next to the chief, it shows the seriousness of the class. And that was a message that was sent from the top down.
I appreciate that, and you're absolutely correct. Thank you.
So I do intend to do more training similar to this. The thing is, it seems to be law enforcement training always seems to be a little bit behind, in my opinion. So we're trying to find more training similar to this type of community type training for our officers. There's not a lot more of it out there. So I do anticipate more being developed in the years to come. And we will be in search of it, and we will bring it here. So I wanted to put that out. I'm proud of our staff for being so receptive to that type of training, because I think it's really sets the tone for us as an agency to be able to say we've done that. I can assure you no other department in the county can say that. I'll turn it back over to the chairman.
Comment, and just quickly, the thought came to me, I wish that the information that you parted impressed me. And my thought was how to get that information to teenagers, young adults, etc., in the community, so that the community knows the proactive management approach that the town is taking for their benefit, for the benefit of the officers, because it should be out there. It's a good thing. And I am very happy to know that.
And that's something that, when we do a training like that, like we've done in the past, like we'll do a press release. So it'll release that information out to the community at the time. But you're right, there probably is a gap there between relaying that information to the youth, or even a year later to say, hey, we went to this training last year, but we're trying to put this in place. We want you to know about it. How can we get that information passed along in either a continual basis? But one thing I think I'll touch on, Mr. Hubbard, is that class that I particularly like, where we have the community and everything in the same classroom, that would be something where we could probably bring in the youth, say 20 members, whether it be representatives of a class or however we determine who we would have with us. What better way to put it out that way and actually have the officers with, whether it be teenagers or college age youth, and bring it forward that way. and let them see how we're approaching things.
Certainly appeals to me. Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments on the training? The chief kind of explains how extensive it is, but Pastor
I have-
Napolitano, anything that you have heard that you would like to comment on?
I mean, I got to say, with everything that we just keep hearing, and I mean, I want to keep commending officers and the chief of police and our town. I stated this, I think, a while back. I had spoken to some people, not in the panel, but I think if more people knew about how the town of New Windsor operates and runs, especially our police department, you know, people would want to live here. People would want to be involved in our community and be more involved with what's going on, knowing the safety and the integrity behind the people that we have, you know, backing our community and all that goes into it. Most people look at it based on the school district and, of course, property taxes. But I mean, something with a young family having small children, you know, we should look into our police departments and see how they operate on a daily basis. And I mean, I'm very impressed by everything that goes on in the town of New Windsor and how they handle things and just how it operates. I'm really, really impressed.
I appreciate those comments. Well, we are live streaming this, right, John? Is Facebook, they got it?
No.
No, we didn't make it again. Okay, so we'll have this on YouTube, but it's hard to get that information out, but people will call from time to time and asking about, first thing they ask about schools, and then they ask about the safety of the town. And then they get into the other things like parks and recreation, things like that. But yeah, I think when people do their homework, they find out that this is a relatively safe community, that there are some people that run this town who are interested in what goes on. So I think people are a little smarter today than they were years ago. I mean, when I just moved here. I'm okay. I'm here. I think people are looking around a little bit. What am I getting myself into? What does the town offer? How is it run? So yeah, I think it's a good comment. You're right, and I'd like to get that information out there, but sometimes you get it out and people miss it. But there's a lot of people like upset with cities right now, and they're relocating up here, and the houses are selling pretty good. So you know, people are doing their homework. Where are they going to move to? And we think, meaning the town board and the town officials, think this is a good place to live.
Absolutely. I just want to say kudos, Chief, as well, for being so proactive. And it does sound like great training and thinking out of the box, and especially wanting to kind of replicate some of the good programs that you see and wanting to interact with our youth and make it real. You know, to the suggestion, maybe put some of this stuff on the website as well. I was just taking a look at the police homepage, you know, some of the training that we've done, you know, to show that, you know, we are being proactive, that you are being proactive, the department is. Thank you.
Yeah, good point, Sylvia.
And Chief, if I could make a recommendation, I thoroughly enjoyed participating in the strengthening the police and community relations. That course was amazing. I wonder if the town would be open to reaching out to community-based organizations to see, you know, if they would be interested in offsetting the cost of the course. If the cost was keeping us from offering it again to the community, I would love to see that course being offered again and have community members participate. It made a difference for my family and my participation in that course. So is there any way that we can link to you through other community-based organizations to help offset the cost if cost was preventing us from offering the course?
Yeah, we could speak about that, Robert. I can speak to you about that. I also think that I'll volunteer the chief. But myself and the chief are willing to speak to any groups anytime about anything. I mean, I'll talk to any group about anything that goes on in this town. And I think the chief will also speak to his end, which would be the police department. So if anybody knows any groups who want to hear what's going on here, I would gladly show up and discuss what's going on or answer any questions that people have about town government, this town government anyway. Okay, Robert, you want to move on to Officer Wellness? Is that what you want?
Wellness, sure. So one of the things we put in place in about April of 2020, so we're talking fairly recently, just last year, We put an employee assistance program, and we put a directive out and a policy, which I emailed out to all of you, so you could kind of take a look at it and look it over and see kind of what I'm talking about. But soon after becoming chief, one of the things I realized was we've had to deal with employee issues in the past, and we kind of never really had a policy, and we kind of work our way through it. I don't like operating like that. I like having things in place, so I'm not searching and delaying things, trying to figure my path out. I want that path laid out in advance. So we put this policy out. We did a lot of research on it. I'll kind of tell you how it transpired. Kind of fell into my lap in the perfect time. But one of the things I want to point out was we need our police officers to be healthy. That's physically, that's mentally, because if they're not, they can't do their job the way they're supposed to be doing it. And this is a very demanding job, and and that's not to take anything away from the officer as an individual. It's a demanding job. Plus you have the struggles of your personal life that everybody has, and the stuff adds up. So we want to find an avenue to help the officers deal with some things that go on. And as you can imagine, police officers see a lot of stuff that the average person doesn't see, and they see it on a daily basis. And it does build up and build up and build up in your head. So I understood those things. One of the things I'll mention I grew up in a home with, my father was an alcoholic. So I kind of get addiction, I think, a little better than maybe someone who didn't grow up in a household like that. So it kind of is a little personal for me. So we need to, as you could kind of probably see, we try to do our best to take care of our people as best we can. So some suicide numbers for police officers. In 2019, 239 police officers committed suicide. In 2020, it was 176. As of last Thursday, in 2021, already 19 had taken their own lives. Police officers have higher rates of alcohol abuse and divorce. That's well known. In addition to the suicide possibility, work performance can suffer with the buildup of stress and personal issues. And what does that mean? That means the community starts to suffer. So what we're trying to do here with our policy is really focus on physical fitness, mental hygiene, healthy nutrition, and safety practices in the workplace. We have a police gym here in the police department. When the police department was built, they made a room that we've turned into a gym. It's got equipment in there, all kinds of workout equipment that the PBA has paid for its membership. So that's an asset here, and that's, again, open 24 hours a day. No matter what time the police officer gets off duty or before they come in, they can go into that gym, do whatever type of workout they want to do, whether it's weight training or there's a treadmill, there's a stair stepper and that kind of thing too. TV, stereo, and we have shower facilities in our locker rooms. So there's really no excuse for any of the police officers to not maintain that physical fitness standard here. And again, that doesn't mean they can't have a gym at their own house or belong to a gym. So we provide proper information for their nutrition. And one of the things also that they talk about is safety practices in the workplace. So we have a seatbelt policy. The police officers, even though not required by law, we require them to wear a seatbelt when they're in their police cars. And we also have a body armor policy where our patrol officers are required to wear their body armor underneath their shirts, and should, God forbid, something like that happen. All that helps with keeping the officers healthy. So we looked around. I looked around. I tried to shop around a little bit for how would we put this employee assistance program in place. Tried a couple locations in the town. Looked into our health care that we have with the town. Everything was just, and we're talking about our health and safety, but it was very expensive to just jump into. So I went to a chief's meeting, and lo and behold, when you know, the New York State Police were there. So we did not realize, and all the chiefs didn't realize, seemingly, the state police offer an EAP program for any police officers, any police department for free. So they have everything in place. They have the peer counselors, the peer support. They have people to do critical incident stress debriefings. They have availability of one-on-one counselors, and their unit operates 24/7. So no matter what time you call them, they're going to answer and have services available for our police officers. It's all free. So once I heard that free word, certainly I was interested, but then also to know that these counselors and everybody involved on the state police end are sworn police officers as well. So there's always been a thing with police officers talking to a civilian. They don't want to open up a lot of times. But when you're talking to another sworn police officer who can kind of understand and get where you're coming from, they're a lot more likely to open up and talk about things. So that was a huge asset for me going into this as well. So we got in touch with them and we brought them on board with us that now anytime we need anything, they're our first call. We set up a coordinator here, one of our sergeants who coordinates the program. And some of the things that the state police EAP program helps us with here are stress issues, alcohol, substance abuse issues, workplace or personnel issues, relationship, marital problems with the officers, family issues, gambling problems, grief, loss issues, financial legal issues, military activation issues, and critical incident management. So as part of our policy, as you can imagine, like we said, the police officers go on all types of calls. Well, we've put out a list in the policy, as you saw, of certain calls that automatically make a referral happen by the supervisor. So just to mention one randomly here, you saw the list when you read over the policy. So if the police officer goes to a call where it's a suicide, that, as you could imagine, could be stressful and can really, especially depending on the situation, however it transpired, could really be troublesome for a police officer to have to bring home. So we make a referral to the state police, and it's an anonymous referral. So it's confidential. So very soon thereafter, somebody from the state police in that specialized unit will contact that police officer that went on that suicide call and just touch base with them. They'll see how they're feeling, talk to them. If the officer doesn't want to talk, they don't have to. But we made that extra step to where, hey, if you want to talk, we're here. You know, we understand what you're going through. You don't have to do this alone anymore. So that's just one type of a situation. So you can understand how that has been particularly helpful. And the officers don't have to worry about any of that information ever getting back to the command staff. They're very, very strict with confidential or their peers. Sometimes you don't want to be the officer that was talking to the counselor. For whatever reason, police officers sometimes don't want to have that reputation. I think it's the wrong reputation. And I think things are changing in police work at this point, but it's all confidential and nobody needs to know. And they're very, very, very strict with that. They're also there, so if we do need to put an employee into like a rehab or something like that, they have the facilities to do that and the avenues to do that, and they know the people to call. So that's another asset for us. We're very proud of this policy. It's been helpful already in the couple, about a year that we've had it in place. We've made multiple referrals. We haven't had to do any big debriefing. So if there's a big incident where there's a police involved shooting or some type of big incident happens, the state police have assets to be able to bring them in to our headquarters and debrief the officers as a group as well before they even go home, which will start the process. So they have all the capabilities that we were looking for. They offer to us for free. Our officers have the information. They could also make their own referrals if they're just feeling like they want to talk to somebody. They know who to call and where to call. And also, as part of the policy you saw on the end, there's some other information, some other phone numbers, and some other wellness guides and things as part of the policy too that they could click on and get more information. As far as, and I'm not done, that's where this policy has started. I want this policy to grow as time goes on and we see more services popping up for our police officers. I would like to start a chaplaincy program where we have chaplains in place. We do have 2 chaplains right now. I would like to have some more chaplains available for our police officers. That early intervention system, that computer software that I've talked about, that also comes into play under this aspect of our policy. I want to work with the PBA a little bit to maybe get some, and it would be on the PBA, but they might want to see if they can get maybe some local gym discounts. Other police departments have done that. We have some gyms in town, at least 3 that I'm thinking of right off the top of my head, where if they can get maybe a discount and get them more physically active, especially during, like, say, a pandemic time like this, where really activity is very important, and they're able to blow off that steam in physical terms as far as lifting weights or running or something like that. I've always been a big runner, where that's been my avenue of stress relief over the course of my career. And I want to do some more in-service training with them as well, as far as wellness, sleep. The importance of sleep can't be underestimated. Physical fitness, mental health, suicide awareness training. I got some good training of that myself that I'd like to put out. I know where to find it now. So that's the stuff that I'm thinking of in the future, and I'll turn it over to the panel for any ideas or suggestions or comments.
Just one comment. You talked about how police, cops don't like to talk to anybody but cops. That's true. And I think these people in New York State Police Employee Assistance Program, I have worked with some of these people who were assigned to that when I was there. I never had anything to do with it, but I know some of the people that were there, and they were people who were in pretty dark places, who fought their way out of some pretty dark places and got back into the state police as they should be. So they have instant credibility when they're talking to a police officer who's in a dark place or heading for a dark place. He's been there, where I haven't been there. Chief hasn't been there, so we don't have that credibility. But those people in those EAP, lots of them have been in dark places, so they have instant credibility when they start talking to cops who are having some issues. So I always thought that was important. Any comments on that wellness? I think Chief does a good job making sure there's people are okay, and that's one of his main jobs, make sure that they're okay so they can do their jobs.
I do have a comment. Thank you, Chief, for that very informative information. I just want to take a moment to hopefully not embarrass Officer Hardy. Would you remind me, Officer Hardy, how many years on the job have you had?
Yeah, no problem. I'm in my 14th year.
Thank you very much for your service. And the reason why I asked, because I think to thank you last week for your service. And I did not want to go another week without thanking you personally for your years of service. Thank you.
So I think, Chief, that's where you're going next. Aren't you going to police in schools?
Yes, that's next on the agenda.
I think Officer Hardy is probably our expert in that, but I'll let the chief pick it up.
Officer Pierce can't wait to talk.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a big talker.
So police in schools, that's one of the things the governor has asked us to touch upon in our roles. We do have a police officer assigned to a school, so we'll talk about that in a moment. As far as the layout of the town of New Windsor goes, we have 5 public schools in the town. We have 4 Newburgh School District schools and 1 Washingtonville Central School District school. Both of those, interestingly, both of those school districts are covered by 3 different police departments. So the Newburgh Central School District, where that lies, is covered by 3 police departments. And the same is true of the Washingtonville Central School District. 3 police departments cover where those school buildings are. Kind of complicates things, could complicate things depending on how the school districts handle it. We also have a yeshiva in town. We have St. Christopher's Kaplan School in town and numerous other pre-K and daycare centers. So we have a lot of, on any given weekday, we have a lot of school buses, school children being transported, teachers. You can tell the difference when school opens that first day and the roads are just packed in the morning and in the afternoon. So it's a very busy place when school is in session in this town. I will say both school districts hold school security meetings monthly, and those are the higher level meetings. So you have the school administrators, superintendents, principals, depending on the district, and you have police department representation at those. I've been attending those meetings for about 18 years. I'm heavily involved in both districts. Safety plans, especially when they were first instituted with the lockdowns and those kind of things. That was about roughly 18 years ago when that all came into play. So I attend the Washingtonville Point meetings and the Newburgh Alert meetings. The Newburgh meetings I'm the only chief that attends those. Just put that out there. We do have a sergeant here assigned to school safety. So one of his things, in addition to supervising his personnel, and this is one of the things I used to do when I was a sergeant, is he's responsible for school safety. So any demands, any needs of the school district fall on that sergeant to make sure they're covered, whether the principals need something, the teachers need something, the students, any of the parents, as far as drills, things going on at the schools, general coordination of anything falls on that sergeant that's in charge of school safety. And that's helpful because it's one point of contact for any of the schools to go to. They know who they have to call, they have his phone number, they have his email, and it makes it very easy. There's no lack of communication there. And that comes in especially handy, and they also have my number. I think that's obvious, but it comes in particularly handy if there's anything going on, whether there be a custody dispute or some type of thing that the police department needs to be brought up to date on. It makes those avenues of communication very simple. It's not a call to the police department. Who could I talk to? Somebody I've never talked to before. No, this is a familiar face to that school administrator. So those are the things we think are important here in Windsor, that's established. So another person that's also involved with the schools is the sergeant that's in charge of community policing. That's Sergeant Sylvester. He sets up and coordinates any needs as far as that goes with the school district. So quite oftentimes we're asked to do presentations for the kids, as you can imagine, anti-bullying. Some of the recent ones we've done, anti-bullying seminar, online safety for the kids. And 2020 made it a little more challenging. I know they even got involved with some virtual type presentations for the kids. So anything to get it done, whatever the schools need, and I know it's going to be verified by the people on the panel, anything the schools need that come through this to police department, they get whatever they need to make sure those schools run good and then make sure they run safely. One of the other things we did that was kind of unique over the last year, we assisted Valesgate School with their meal distributions on Wednesday. When they first started, we noticed not only was traffic backing up on the Forge Hill Road, it was backing all the way out 32 and down past the diner by the New Windsor Diner. So it was quite a challenge, but we had police officers that were able to go help out and make sure the cars were safe off the road and everybody got the meals that were being distributed without an issue. As far as officers in the schools, Newburgh School District, we do not have any police officers assigned to the schools. There was a plan developed back in 2019 that the superintendent developed that would have assigned 2 New Windsor police officers to their 4 schools. So each police officer would be assigned 2 schools to go back and forth from. That plan was scrapped by the school board. It was not approved, and they had to go back to the table for their budget of the 2019-2020 school year. And the police officers were taken out of the budget. And that was not only our police officers, but the city of Newburgh's police officers and the town of Newburgh's police officers. That was scrapped. As far as Little Britain School, which is Washingtonville School, that on 207, they approached us back in 2018 to have a police officer in the present in their school, and they did the same with Blooming Grove and the same with the village of Washingtonville. They approached us and basically said, what do we need to do to get a police officer in our school? And we worked out an agreement with them, a written agreement, and where they fund the police officer for his wages and everything while he's in the school building. And he's there on a full-time basis. If the kids are in the school and staff, the police officers in the school, and that would be Officer Pierce, who happens to be on our panel. One of the things I will say, and this is, I think, one of the things that the governor want to discuss as far as police officers in the school, our police officer is in that school for security, and security only, to make sure that school is safe. That is what his primary mission is. He does not get involved in a student acting up in a classroom, the normal operation of the school, even if it's a kid misbehaving, he doesn't become involved in that. That's not his job. His job is to make sure that school is safe. And he would only get involved if it would be a matter where a call would normally come into the New Windsor Police Station that we would be sending a police officer. At that point, the officer would get involved. So that could be something, whether it be someone that's prohibited by an order of protection from showing up at the school and is now at the school. That's something, say, perhaps, or a medical emergency where, it's a life or death type of situation, someone choking. that's perhaps when he would step up, for instance. So I just want to make that clear. He's not there, and he's in an elementary school, but he's not there to arrest any of the children or even teach there. He's not there to teach. He's there for security, and that's what he does. And even with that, I already mentioned in one of the other meetings the feedback that we've gotten from the parents, the teachers, the principal, and even as high as the superintendent of the overwhelming acceptance of the officer being there and the positive benefits have been amazing. So we even got, I think it was part of the, Officer Pierce talked about this the other day. I think it was part of the survey. One of the parents that answered the survey actually gave Officer Pierce credit for their child making it through elementary school. And I think what better statement of Officer Pierce being in that school and doing a little bit of talking with the kids and just making those friendships and having his presence there. I don't think there could be a better message or statement from a parent than that. So we support him being in the school, and it's been a positive experience for us since 2018. And I think the school district would agree with that. So, and I just want, if Officer Pierce, did you want to say anything here?
No, just as anyone had any questions as to what I do at school or what goes on.
Well, I'm going to call out, so if I may. What did you do with this child? That and I need to hear a little bit more, please.
Well, as you can imagine, stay at school.
I have a little trouble hearing.
The school is first grade through fifth grade, so all the students are new for first grade. The kid had very bad anxiety issues, would cry, never wanted to ride the bus. It was tough to see a kid, go through what he did. So I kind of stepped in, tried to mentor the kid, let him know first day, every day he would see me there. So it was wonderful, to see him excel eventually.
Thank you for being an excellent public servant. I'm a father, grandfather. I'm impressed. Thank you.
Hey, Hardy, what do the kids call you? When they refer to you, they call you Officer Pierce, Officer Hardy?
You're muted, Hardy.
Just they just call me Officer Pierce.
Okay.
That's all.
All right. I think that these programs where the police officers are in the school are very good because you're capturing these kids when they're young and they're seeing that, okay, he's a police officer, but he's a pretty good guy. I like him. He's always smiling, always helping me. He's kind of doing things around the school, and I feel safe when he's around. And maybe some of those things we keep talking about in the community, maybe we need to capture these kids younger to let them see that the cop is a person too, not just somebody driving by in a police car and off he goes. I'm sure that, listen, Hardy's really a good guy, has a great personality. He's probably perfect for this kind of job. And I only wish that the schools would maybe think a little bit about that, because I think we could capture these kids a little early and get a little different view of what policemen are really like. So that's just my comment. I think that interaction with kids when they're young is very, very important. Anybody have anything they want to talk to about that? Agree with that? Don't agree with it?
I have to say, as a school principal, I agree. I want to say that I volunteer my school. If our school district is willing to pilot having an officer on the school grounds, I wouldn't mind being the pilot for the school district. I think as our children, when they're young, they're very impressionable, and what a better place to start fostering positive relationships between the officers and the community. So thank you, Officer Pierce. I'm a little jealous of the school out there that has you. But I think it would be something great if we can start that in our schools and really start with our young children. I remember as a new administrator, it was always comforting to know that the police department was only a phone call away and that they responded really quickly. I didn't know, Chief, that the 911 calls went somewhere else, because whenever we have asked for help from the police department comes really quickly to us. So thank you for letting us know that. And I'm really hoping that part of this reform will involve some opportunities for our police officers to engage with our younger children.
Yeah, I saw a video not too long ago with some police cops showed up at a school and they're handcuffing a 9-year-old girl. So I kind of think that it's important that people who deal with kids know how to deal with them. I'm sure that Hardy knows how to deal with kids now because he's been around them a lot. And I think it's important that they see that up close and personal, that, hey, he's pretty good, I like him. Stu Russell, do you have anything to say about what's going on here tonight? Is he still with us?
Yes, sir.
Stu?
I'm here. Yeah, no. I have nothing to add. It's very impressive presentation. I'm all over the county on these committees. And New Windsor, I think, is doing a great job. The chief is very proactive. And I agree with his comment when he says you're way ahead of the curve. I would have no problem confirming that.
Yeah, that's why I asked you, because I know you've been around to different.
Oh, yeah. Maybe about 15 different municipalities
Okay.
presently. And we have several more to go that really, believe it or not, haven't even started this process yet. So
We know, yeah, we try to follow what everybody's doing. We're trying to do the best we can. So we look at what other people are doing and kind of try to put our plan together.
yeah, no, this is, the process has been great. The information has been great. The interaction on the committee, I think, is very active, more active than I've seen overall. It's the public participation part is next and the reaction to it. I think overall, it's very positive, very good.
Okay, appreciate that. Anybody else have anything they want to put out there? Okay, Robert, I'm going to say this. You have one more topic, but if we don't move this to next week, I'm going to report you to the County Office of the Aging.
Yeah, me too.
I need to go to sleep. Oh, somebody else has seconded that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you. So I think we'll cover the last topic next week. Chief, is that okay with you?
That's fine with me.
Okay, I thank everybody for participating tonight, and we'll catch up with you next week, and the chief will send you out maybe some body cams and the agenda for next week. And thank you very much. And once again, we failed on the Facebook feed, but we're going to get this sooner or later. We have my name right, so that's a step in the right direction. I'm no longer Patrick Mango.
For sure.
All right,
Chief, would
everybody.
you stay on the line?
Yes. The
Chief, I have a question for you,
Yeah,
Chief,
for sure.
after everyone leaves. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Good night, all.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
night, everyone.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you very much.
Thank
Have a
you,
good one.
everyone.
Be safe.